It was
Doing well. Yeah. So I'd like
Hi
to
Sherry.
introduce our guest today, right? Uh, Sherry Levine is a poet and editor who has experienced severe mental health disorder and distress. She lives in Portland, Oregon. Her poem, Face Down, won the Lewis Cranston Memorial Prize, and she won first prize, Poet's Choice, in the Oregon Poetry Association biannual contest in 2017. She received the Oregon Poetry Award National Poetry Contest in 2025. So, congratulations.
Thank
Her
you.
most recent project as editor is Waking in the Blue, poems and essays about mental health. And I met Sherry through the National Association for Poetry Therapy conference that was held in Portland, April 2025, where I saw her business card. I was intrigued and reached out to her. Sherry's publications include I Remember Not Sleeping, and Jason Renaud, the director of the Mental Health Association of Portland, wrote, accompanied by beautiful illustrations by Moises Camacho, Levine's poem intrigues and pulls the reader to a strange and fragile state of mind. And Kevin Fitz, the executive director of the Oregon Mental Health Consumers Association, wrote about I Remember Not Seeing. I am thrilled to recommend Sherry Levine's new collection of poetry. Through raw emotion and masterful use of language, she transforms private struggles into art that will resonate with readers. Sherry has also written or edited A Joy to See, an ekphrastic anthology. Oregon poets celebrate the art of Kay Levine, stealing flowers from the neighbors in memory of my mother, Kay Levine, and also In These Voices. So, warm welcome, Sherry, to Talking Back to Suicide.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here today. Thank you.
So, Sherry, I know that you have a lot to share from your lived experience. Um, Please begin anywhere that you would like to in terms of your life journey.
Okay, well, it's quite a journey, but I guess I'll start with the illness itself. I've had this illness my whole life. I'm now 56, and I think that I didn't realize how hard this illness was until a couple of years ago when I was on lithium, which is a really good mood stabilizer for bipolar disorder. And I was on it for 35 years until we found that the lithium had damaged my kidneys pretty severely, and my thyroid. It damages my thyroid, but you could live with your thyroid, but really hard to live without a kidney. So my doctor and I and my partner and my dad decided that I should get off the lithium. And when I did, I went really mentally ill. And I've been ill ever since. I've been unstable ever since. And so during this time, I wasn't really able to read or write, but I knew that I could do a project. And my other books, I was able to write them and read them that Diane mentioned. But I put together this book called A Joy to See. My mom passed away, and that caused a lot of more illness because of the grief. But what I did is so like I said, I wasn't able to read or write because during mental illness or bipolar disorder, it's hard for the brain to concentrate. It's hard for the brain to read and allow things to go in your brain to concentrate. It's hard when somebody's talking to you, you don't really able to really understand them. And it's really hard to write. I mean, it's hard to write, it's hard to concentrate. So, anyway, because I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I always have to have a project. And so my mom passed away, like I said, and I wanted to honor my mother in a way that she wasn't necessarily honored so much as a artist, because she's from upstate New York, and she didn't really show her art as much as she could have. So I'm not going to go into the whole story. It's a long story. But what I did is I had her paintings in cards, little cards like this, and I contacted all of the best poets of Oregon, and I asked them to write an ekphrastic poem. So an ekphrastic poem is a poem in response to an artwork. It could be a painting, it could be a sculpture. And I was feeling a little, so with bipolar disorder, you can feel a little hypomanic, which is you feel a little more bold. So I contacted them, and they did indeed write response poems. And so I published this book called A Joy to See. And I'll show you what it looks like inside. So it's my mother's paintings. Let's see if I can do this. And response poems. And some of the poets are pretty hoity-toity, when I use that word. They're pretty popular in Oregon and nationally. So there's about 40 poets in here. And here are the poems. And so I could go on and tell the story about Powell's Bookstore. I don't know. I'm feeling I'm talking a lot. Should I stop now?
No, go on and say about Powell's, which is what our a famous bookstore is.
Okay, so Powell's Bookstore is the biggest bookstore in the world. It has used books too, and that's why it's the biggest. And it's really big deal if you get to read at Powell's. But I wasn't thinking of reading there at the time. I wanted to have a reading, but again, I wanted to honor my mother. So then I started to thinking about a reading, and I walked into Powell's Bookstore, and I asked if I could talk to the book buyer, which is pretty bold. So again, I guess I don't know if it's the chutzpah or whatever, but I walked into the book buyer, and I said, I want to have a reading in this bookstore. So I showed him the book. Here's the book. And he looked at the names of the poets, and he was like, wow. He's like, if you can get these poets to come, we'll have a reading. So 2 summers ago, they put my name on the marquee of Powell's, which is a really big, fantastic. And so we had a reading with all the art books around her, because she was an artist. And so one by one, the poets came and stood on the podium, and her art came down, and slides of her art. And there were about 100 people there. And I think it was probably the happiest day of my life. So I think with bipolar disorder, it's hard to see how much is your personality or how bold you can be. So that's been happening in the past couple of years. There's a lot more, but I wanted to kind of celebrate this book with you. Thanks.
Oh, beautiful. And what emotions were going through you during that reading?
Yeah, it was really difficult not to cry. People were crying in the audience because it was my mother, who was my best friend. And actually, during the reading, I talked to her because I felt like she was there. And I said, Mom, look around you. These are all your friends, the art books and everything. And a lot of people have lost their mother, and so they felt it too. It was probably the biggest day of my life.
And I know that you have a new project that you're working on. Could you share about that? How you had the idea and what progress you're making?
Yeah, I actually started the idea maybe for a selfish reason, because I haven't really been able to write very well since I got off the medication. And so I just, feel pretty lonely at home. And I wanted to know how other poets felt about how their mental illness affects their poetry. So I put out a call, and I got responses from all over the world. I got responses from, well, not South Africa, but I got responses from India and Wales and Pakistan and many different kinds of people. And they wrote poetry and wrote essays about how their illness affects their poetry. So it's a manuscript now. It's 45 poets, and some poets are, pretty big name, and some poets aren't. And so we're just looking for a publisher.
And you said, Sherry, that you put out a call. How did you do that?
Well, there's a link called Poetry for Mental Illness, and it's started by this man in UK. And he gets, I chose some of the names, put out a call in his link. But interestingly, I put out a call in Poets and Writers, which is a big time magazine for poets and writers. And so, but what I want to say is that when I put out the call, I mentioned mental illness. How does your mental illness affect your poetry? So with mental illness, I wasn't getting much. And it costs every time you put a call. And so a friend of mine said, don't say mental illness, say mental health issues. And then submissions came pouring in. So that to me showed stigma, self-stigma, and the shame that is felt at this time.
Sherry, when I was putting together the introduction for you, that first sentence where I wrote has experienced severe mental health disorder and distress, it started off with lived mental health experience, right? And then, just as you're saying, I was wondering, should I say psychiatric illness? Should I say lived mental health experience? And I think that idea of stigma, right? Even in that first sentence was striking me, and also how you would feel about it, right? So I'll ask you now, what do you think of the phrase lived mental health experience that people often use to describe, well, lived mental health disorder, distress, illness experience, and yet it's commonly used mental health experience?
Yeah. Well, I told you that I've had this illness all of my life, and until I became unstable, and didn't tell anybody. I felt shame. I felt nervous. When I was sick, I didn't tell my supervisors. I was a teacher. I got let go from jobs. I felt there was stigma. And so actually for the past couple of years, I've become a mental health advocate. And I've wrote a book about my experiences, and I've read my book in front of hundreds of people. I'm on the board of DBSA, which is Depression Bipolar Association, and I'm very out about my illness. I mean, I give speeches about it because I don't know. I feel like I have nothing left to lose with it. I mean, my mom died, and then I have this illness, and I think it's important to talk about, just like suicide. I think it's important to talk about because it normalizes the illness.
You've shared a few times now that you've had the bipolar disorder for a long time. Could you go back to when there might have first been some indications that there was some difficulty?
Yeah, in high school, I was a really good student. I was surrounded by friends who were going to Yale and Harvard. And then one day in high school, I couldn't read. The words were like racing across the page. And so my identity was wrapped up in my intelligence. And so if I couldn't read or write, I tried to suicide. And then same thing happened the following year. I couldn't, all of a sudden, my brain wasn't working. And, back then, I think talking about, it was called manic depression, wasn't really talked about that much in the 80s. So after those 2 suicide attempts, I then had a real big manic episode because a psychiatrist gave me an antidepressant, which causes a manic episode. And I found myself taking the train to San Francisco, having a full-blown episode there. And there are many, many more examples. I think the biggest one, which is what my book is called, I Remember Not Sleeping, is in the late 90s, I got my degree in teaching English as a second language. A lot of my friends were going to Korea or, other countries Japan, where they would make money. And so I chose Prague, Czech Republic. I was hypomanic randomly because my boyfriend's grandmother was Czech and she made these delicious pastries. So it's like, oh, I'll just go to Prague. And I signed a contract. Anyway, I got there and I drank a lot of beer because it was like 25 cents for like this much beer. And I drank a lot of beer and it washed out all the lithium. I became full-blown manic and psychotic. And I found myself in a Czech psychiatric hospital where they didn't speak English, which was really terrifying. So I had some severe manic episodes, psychotic episodes. So along with the depression, I had more episodes of mania.
I'm thinking back to what you just said about having been prescribed the antidepressant, which you're absolutely right. For those who have a underlying bipolar disorder, the antidepressant might trigger the hypomanic to manic state. And sometimes that's how the bipolar state is understood, right? I'm not saying it's a good thing to be triggered into the bipolar, but very often it's depression, which is first seen by the mental health provider. It's interesting because in a state of hypomania, a person potentially might be feeling up and good and they're not seeking mental health treatment. And then if you're full blown into mania, so disorganized, and also you may not think there's anything wrong because now you're in this overblown, super bold, manic state, and the people around you realize there's something wrong, but we don't understand that. So it's the depression that can bring people into treatment, right? So when you were first having those difficulties in high school, were you able to share what was going on with your parents?
Well, my parents were divorced, and I don't think they just understand what was happening because, after I tried to suicide, I went to 5 proms. I went to all these proms. I don't know. I just wanted to go to a restaurant, I think. So like my dad was looking at me. He said, well, I would bounce back and I would be fine. So they took me to I don't know, it was really sad in high school because I tried to suicide twice. And so they put me in a psychiatric hospital. And, but like I said, I would bounce back and I graduated, but I didn't get to go to a fancy high school like my friends did. So that was kind of a disappointment. But yeah, in college, I had a hard time. I mean, at college, I had a hard time because I thought I would study psychology. And I read about the part of manic depression, and I'm like, I was afraid that was me. So I changed my major to English. So, yeah. And then in my first manic episode, it was pretty awful. I mean, I wasn't sleeping. I was doing really dangerous things. So my dad brought me back and put me in a psychiatric hospital for a year. So it was really severe. And it's really hard to even think about it, to tell you the truth.
Thank you for all that you've shared really so far, because you're right, difficult, right? And that's part of your lived experience, but not all of your lived experience, but clearly severe and chronic mental illness can have profound impacts, right?
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned about your kidneys, and it's true what you say that kidney function needs to be monitored, thyroid function, various other electrolytes and other chemicals in our body need to be monitored, uh, especially when you're on lithium. Were you receiving regular monitoring while you were on that?
I think my psychiatrist wasn't careful enough, because there are many times I was toxic on lithium, and because of I was dehydrated, and you have to be really careful. And it wasn't until recently, with a couple of years ago, that my doctor tested. It's called creatinine, and if the creatinine is high, then you're having kidney disease. And I think that my psychiatrist wasn't careful enough and didn't catch it, and also wasn't careful enough when I was toxic on it. And I think that, yeah, I think that he didn't catch it. So yeah, that was hard.
And then were you tapered off the lithium,
No,
or just stopped it?
they just stopped it. Yeah. And then they stopped it. And then my dad, he gets really involved. He read this article that maybe I could take a little lithium. So I went to a kidney doctor. Can't remember the name of that kidney doctor.
Nephrologist.
Yeah, nephrologist.
Yeah.
Thank you. And they were like, okay, let's give her a little bit and see what happens. So I took a little bit, and then the numbers went really up. And my doctor said I was on stage anyway, a big chunk of my kidneys I had diseased. So we had to get it out completely, stop it completely.
Obviously not good that it damaged your kidneys. Good
Right.
that you got off of it.
Yeah.
And I want to say, for anyone who's listening, with proper monitoring with your doctor on a regular basis, right, and maintaining good hydration, and also communicating with your doctor how you're feeling, that lithium can be a powerful positive agent for bipolar disorder. But again, there has to be that monitoring, right? Because there can be serious side effects from it.
Yeah.
Were you prescribed other medication or other mood stabilizers as a trial after that?
We tried everything. We tried about 6 or 7 different kind of drugs with horrible side effects. And we tried everything. I mean, yeah, everything. And you can imagine the worst side effects ever. Weight gain, not being able to move my legs, not being able to walk, not being able to swallow, just really horrible. And so now my doctor has me on, his own cocktail that he came up with, because there is nothing I can take.
And how have you been doing recently in terms of your mental health? And also, what are if there are, like, early warning signs that you've learned, like, oh, I'm tipping into depression, or I'm becoming hypomanic or manic? Are there any warning signs for you?
Well, I actually haven't been doing that well. It's I've experienced depression like I've never experienced it since high school. So I feel the depression, and it's been suicidal depression recently. And my partner took off work to care for me, and so then I don't really go that much hypomanic. It's been hard. It's been really hard. I really miss lithium. I miss stability. I can function, but definitely not myself.
Sharing that you're going through this, right? Yeah. In terms of your writing, perhaps you can talk about how you discovered that you're a poet. How did that process happen?
Well, that's an interesting question. So when I was in the psychiatric, I've always loved poetry, but when I was in the psychiatric hospital, um, I needed to write. I needed an outlet. I couldn't just sit there and smoke all day. So the staff let me be in a room by myself and with a old Mac, and I wrote all day, and I wrote poetry, and probably wasn't very good, but they knew how much I loved it, and so they had this idea that they would put me in a van with the name of the hospital and drive me over to the college, the nearby college, and I would study with a professor at his home, and then after that, I would take classes in the college, and then bus me home, shuttle me home, sorry, not home, shuttle me back
Yeah.
to the hospital where I continued to write. And I was really influenced by Robert Lowell because he was bipolar, but he won the Pulitzer Prize. And so I was really influenced by him, and I was reading his poetry and, Sylvia Plath, of course. But anyway, so poetry saved me. Poetry saved me.
How did it save you? Or what is there about poetry reading and poetry writing that can be life saving?
Yeah, well, it was a way of creative expression. It was a way of, expressing myself, expressing my feelings. It's really hard to talk to people about, how you feel. So I was able to write it out, and it felt really good to be able to write it out. And, at that time I wasn't sharing my poetry because what are you going to share it in the mental hospital? But when I started going to school, I met a good friend, and we shared our poetry with each other. And it was probably the best poetry time of my life to be able to share it.
And in your sharing, do you have any, I don't know if the right word is expectation. How do you want the other person to respond or to listen or to hear you?
Chris, she passed away, my best friend, and she was able to divulge her secret. She had a sexual abuse, and she had told nobody, but she was able to write it in her poetry. And I had told nobody that I was living in a psychiatric hospital, but through our writing, we could share it with each other. So I think that's what's great about writing, because you can share what's going on with you. Yeah.
And if one, I don't know, would want to start writing, is it just start doing the writing? Is there any, what suggestions would you have?
Yeah, I really believe in writing with other people. I actually have been teaching a course called Intro to Creative Writing at a neighborhood center. And I teach my method is that I give a prompt, like write about a door or something. And then people write for 15 minutes about the door, whatever, anything. They could write poetry, they could write fiction, they could write memoir. And then after 2 prompts, we share our work. So we read it out loud. I really believe in writing with each other and sharing work without judgment, without no judgment. Say, I really like this line, or they don't have to say anything. And then we thank you for sharing. And that, I believe, really helps, because I didn't have that I didn't have that until, I didn't have that at all until I studied this. It's called Amherst Writer's Way, right after my divorce. And, I met with these people in a woman's home, and that was the style that she did.
Was that Pat Schneider?
That was Pat Schneider.
I took that course too with Pat.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did, many years ago. Yeah, in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I didn't know Pat. But although Pat wrote a blurb for my book, and I talked to her on the phone, and so that's really cool that so I took it with somebody else, and took it for like 12 years in Portland, and we got together and we shared our writing. And I think that's so important. mean, I think we shouldn't. I don't think writing is for isolation. I think we need to share. I really believe that. And the conference we went to, how we met through the business card. I really believe I guess poetry of healing. It helps to heal. And you don't have to divulge your inner secrets as Chris did and I did. You can write about anything, you know. So yeah, anyway, so then I got this job and then I do it this way. And I've had the same students for about 3 years and they're following me and it's just wonderful. I love that style.
Are there different forms of poetry that you write?
It's pretty much free verse, and sometimes pretty much narrative, free verse. So, but we play with other forms and it's play, it's about play.
Can you share a bit with the I Remember Sleeping, right, which was a poem that you wrote, or tell the story, if you could, about that. And you also found a fantastic artist. And how did that happen?
Okay. All right. Thank you for asking. So I had written this poem, I Remember Not Sleeping, and published it in my book. And then it was published in another journal. So as I said, when I became ill, I couldn't read or write, but I needed a project. So what I did is, and that poem is about all of my experiences in hospitals, but particularly in that mental hospital in Prague. And I wanted and I wanted to take that poem apart and chop it into lines. And so here's the book. I hired this artist, and I think he did a fantastic job with the art. And here's another example. So I took can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
I took the poem apart, and each page I wrote like a little paragraph and a couple lines, and then I put quotes in from other people, and so I did that, and then so it's really a book about resilience. So it's not. I want to make sure that it's not like, oh, poor me. It's a book about hope and resilience, and that's the tone I want, the message I give it when I do readings. But so anyway, I sent my manuscript to a publisher, and he really liked it, and then we published it. And then when I read it, I read it in front of like the big poetry community that I had made from being at Powell's and then starting my own poetry series. I met all these like 100 people, and I read this book in front of 100 people. So it's very vulnerable.
And what kind of response did you get to your sharing?
Well, I think they were shocked, and but I think they were shocked, and I think they were surprised that I would share something like that personal. But I think they felt, I think they felt I was brave. They were, thank you for being so brave, and thank you for sharing this with us. And it was hard doing that because I kind of kept it to myself, my mental health problems, my mental illness. And the day I did that, I was shaking.
I want to express gratitude to you, right, for being brave and vulnerable and doing something that's so difficult to do and yet needs to be done, right?
Thank you.
You mentioned the word resilience. What does that word mean to you?
Well, it's interesting. So I presented my book at a mental health group or something, and for the state of Oregon. And this one guy in the audience said, "Oh, you're really lucky, like you're really lucky that, you went through this and that you're okay." And I said to him, "No, it's not luck. It's about keep going, fight this, keep going, that you can overcome this." And so, yeah, I have overcome a lot of difficulty because I wanted to keep going. And I think that's what's resilience, is that you don't just give up. I've had this illness. I'm 56, and I don't want to give up. I keep trying. I was in Prague, and I think this was a moment. I was in Prague, and I was given some kind of drug, and I drank, and I had a seizure on the floor by myself in a bathroom, and I seized, and it was like I got up. I got myself up. I want to live, and then I called the hospital, the American hospital, and they told me to go to the psychiatric hospital. But I think the point is you get yourself off the floor, metaphorically or realistically. So I believe in that.
And in those suicide attempts that you mentioned earlier on, and that happened when you were in high school?
That happened when I was in high school.
And what helped you at that point to get up off the floor, as it were, to go on?
I called the ambulance myself. And, my dad wasn't really happy about that, and he wasn't very nice about it. But yeah, I called the ambulance. So yeah, I did it myself.
If it's okay for you to share, and if it's not, just say no. Why did your father not like that you called the ambulance?
Well, because I don't know. I think he was really tough. He was emotionally abusive, I think, and I don't know. I think that the part that was the worst is that the second time I did it, he would come in to the hospital and he's like, "Well, you did it again. Happy anniversary," and I was going through, they pump your stomach and all that. And he wasn't very kind, and he thought it was shameful. He thought the whole thing was shameful. In fact, when I was dating in high school, he's like, "Well, you can't don't tell any of the guys that you have this illness." So it was shameful. And my mother was, I think she was kind of mentally ill. And so they divorced, and he just didn't want me to be anything like her.
Very cruel, right?
Yeah.
Right. And to keep it hidden, right? Feeling shame. Yeah. Sadly, it's a reflection on what was going on with him.
Right.
Yeah. So Kino, I know there's been internet difficulties.
Yeah. Connectivity.
Oh, we're glad you're back.
Yeah.
I know you have questions that you'd like to ask Sherry, or any comments?
Yeah. Sherry, I want to ask first, since you were chatting about your father now, is your father still alive? Do you still have a relationship with him?
Yeah, he's 88, and we have a really great relationship because he's really nice. I think, I'd say that testosterone, like losing all your testosterone, he's really nice. He's really supportive, and he wants to see all my poetry, and he tells me how proud he is of me, and he's financially helping. And, the thing is, I forgave him, and that's really hard, but I've had therapy my whole life, and yeah.
Forgiving, that's the first step. When people are mean to you or cruel to you or they hate you, you have to retaliate with love and kindness. That's what I believe, because in the end, there's this realization that goes off in these people's minds. It's a norm, how parents can be cruel when you're growing up, but when you're adulthood, if you're lucky, even your teens, then the love starts to show, the support starts to show. I quite haven't pinned it down to why that is, or maybe, as a kid, completely off topic. But as a kid, maybe you have this, dream of becoming an astronaut or a vet, whatever, and you don't get your parents' support. No, it's a waste of time, and
Yeah.
you need to get a proper job. And then you grow up and you actually make it happen, and it works for you, and then you do have their support. Yeah, as I said, I still haven't put it on why that happens, but it's a norm.
Well,
It's a norm.
yeah, I
I
think.
wanted to ask, when you're talking about, sorry, you can comment. You can comment.
Oh no, I just think it's something about them. Something's going on with them. Why they can't. Why something about their childhood. I think the parents' childhood.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That
I want
makes
to
sense. They also got some sort of trauma that they haven't healed.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sherry,
Yeah.
when we had met each other, if I had shared this with you, but when I had attempted suicide and was medically admitted when I was in medical school, my father had said something to me that I had no memory of, zero memory.
Well,
And then so I was in my mid 20s when this happened. When I was about 40 years old, my father told me he wanted to apologize to me. Out
wow.
of the blue, he said that. And he was no man that was apologizing. He said,
Wow.
I want to apologize. And he told me that when I had attempted suicide, he had said to me, Diane, the next time you want to kill yourself, tell me, and I'll tell you the right way to do it.
Wow.
And those were the words that came right out of his mouth that he needed to apologize for. And he was holding that for over 20 years, of which, thank God, I was in total denial. I blanked it out when he said that to me. And yet he apologized.
I think it's
Right. So you in a way, there's hope. Right?
there's hope. There's hope. I think that
And also to be able to also go on living without the apology. Right?
yep. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Kino, go on. I know you were going to ask something else or say something else.
We can get really deep on this show, eh? Like really deep, all the way down, which is good. It shows listeners that we're human. We get it. We understand it. Sherry, if you're comfortable in sharing, you were talking about being unstable and psychotic episodes. Like, what examples can you mention, happens to a person that's going through that? So we can,
Yeah.
use the show to help them from personal experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm really not used to being so depressed, because I'm not medicated. But I think that, when I was psychotic, I had become psychotic because I was taking this medication. Anyway, I just could see myself on the floor dead. I could envision me dead. It was awful. And I kept thinking about how I would do it. And it was awful. And it was the worst feeling. I don't know how to describe it, because you don't want to be dead. You just want to go away. You just want to go away and not come back, but not dead. It's so weird. It's not dead, like I'd felt in high school. And what specifically question do you have about that?
Okay, let me throw a hypothetical scenario out there. When you talk about now going through this state of mind and being unstable, can someone in this position, without knowing, or there's no awareness that, look, something is wrong with me, can I harm someone else because of that mental illness, because I'm unstable?
It's really important to have support in your life. It's like, it's really important. And so my partner happens to be a psychologist, and he actually has helped me through this. I didn't have anybody in high school, but I think it's important to reach out. I don't know if you're asking me that question about reaching out and support, but I think without support, I actually I've called the suicide hotline in the past, and they're really helpful. I didn't really have a plan. So if you have a plan, I think 988 is the best thing. But my partner is really helpful because I just was dwelling on not wanting to be alive for quite a while, and it was really hard. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's like this feeling of, it's just this horrible feeling. And, I want to say, like, I don't mean to be cliche, but it does pass. Like it passed for me, but it didn't ever feel like it was going to pass. But, I was hearing things, I was hearing people talk, their voices talking about me, and yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking
But I
about
feel
what
you. I feel you what you're saying.
what you said before. I
No,
thought
for instance,
you were also
no. I can get where Sherry, where you're coming from. As a community, we can be so judgmental as well. We see someone who is going through some sort of mental illness. Instead of actually telling them, look, you need to get help, and you can be a harm to yourself, or you can be a harm to other people. We more like want to judge them, and the moment they act out or do something wrong, we want to call the police as an example, to get you arrested. And I feel, that's not the way to go about it as a community, as humans. If someone is going through something, we need to be there to support them. That's my message to listeners. Because at times people don't even know what they're going through themselves. They don't know what they're feeling or why they're even feeling it. And that's when we need to step up and say, okay, we're here to help you.
Right.
I think sometimes in
Hope
the
I'm making
media,
sense to people. Well,
I think in the media,
no,
sometimes the person with a mental health disorder, that they can be dramatized in terms of they're a danger, like they're more a danger to other people, right? Or they're the person yielding the knife, right? Whereas in reality, the person who is at mental health distress is more vulnerable to being attacked by others, right? Or even of harming themselves. So that's also something that's important for us to realize, right? That and it might also be related to that idea of stigma, right? That we're seeing that person with a mental health disorder as being frightening. They're frightening to me. They're going to hurt me, right? And that's a reason to push them away, right? However, the reality is, as I just mentioned, that someone who's has a psychiatric illness is more at risk of being hurt and harmed by others.
Right. I didn't tell anybody, about my life, my experiences. And I came back from Prague. People were like, "Oh, how is Prague? How is teaching?" And I would say, "Oh, it was great. I had a great time." And all the times I got let go from teaching, it was very, I don't know, embarrassing. The whole thing was embarrassing. But I really do believe in community, what you're saying, it's like, that's why I'm putting together this book, because in other cultures, they don't have that kind of community. It's like in India, this poet was talking about, we don't have any community here. And it's shameful to be a poet. So just looking at other cultures is really interesting to me, because, we do have it here, but it's still feared. I think what you're saying is it's feared and people don't understand. So, but I think things are getting a little bit better.
Why do you think so?
Well, we have these support groups their support. I never had that before. And they have, I understand that, like with NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, they have like people will visit you in the hospital if you're sick. I never had that. So there's more support than there used to be, because it happened to me. I would just stay in my apartment. I wouldn't leave. I couldn't shop. I couldn't do anything. So, but I think now it's a little bit more supportive, but I think the stigma is still there.
Do you feel that just talking about it, I shouldn't say just, but talking about it is the way to help eradicate the stigma? Or are there other things we as individuals or society should be doing?
Yeah, I think there needs to be more media about it. And, we have these celebrities who are, here are the celebrities that are bipolar, but it's a really dangerous disease. It's a really dangerous illness. And I think that, we need more education, we just need more education, more people like stepping up, not just in NAMI, not just in DBSA, but, in communities.
Nodding my head, yes. Yes. Kino.
You said that you were looking for a publisher. Have you ever thought about self-publishing yourself?
Well, I've had these books published, but they never seem to reach.
Did you hear what I said?
I don't know. Can you repeat it, please?
Oh, can't hear you.
Yeah, about your publishing. Can you hear me now?
Not you cut out, so I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Try again, Kino.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now that there's latency. So what I said is with your publishing, but I think you did hear me and you answered in the question. Have you ever thought about, publishing yourself? Like completely decentralized?
Yeah, I kind of did that with A Joy to See. I had a friend do it, but what I want to do with this Waking in the Blue, which is a poem by Robert Lowell, but I want it to be national. I want to get the word out nationally, not just stuck in Portland, Oregon, So I don't know how to do that, really. I mean, I was thinking, I could do a TED Talk, I do this, but it's really hard to market yourself. And if I self-publish this, I have to market myself all over the place. And so I thought I'd get it published in a university press so it could be used in the classroom or something, just to make a bigger message, broader. So if you could help me publish, that would be great, if you want to help publish. I'm just joking.
It's one of the avenues I'm exploring. We also have a lot of authors, within the network, and a lot of them are asking themselves the question of, why do I need a publisher? Why do I need a publicist? Because the fees that you're paying or the royalty share that they're taking doesn't justify, because they're literally not doing anything. It's like you're paying them, but you still have to market yourself. You still have to sell your books. So what's the point? And that's the conversation on the table at the moment. And I feel in the very near future, there's not going to be a need for publicists anymore or publishers anymore. Authors are starting to wake up and be like, sure, why should I pay $300-400 a month, just for you to be the middleman to set me up, with appointments, with a podcast, get me on an online magazine. But then when I look at my book sales, nothing's getting sold.
Yeah.
So we're exploring that. We are exploring that. So do you want me to give you some answers about that in the near?
Yeah, sure. With this book, I had a publisher. I didn't have to pay anything, I didn't have to pay anything. It's just that there was no word out. It was so frustrating. So I know people I just think it's so hard to get your message out. It's so hard. I find that, writing the book is so much work, and then you're exhausted from the book, but then you have to get the word out. And so how do you do that? So I need I need a marketing agent.
And Sherry, in terms of getting the word out, right, which is also sharing your book and what you wrote, what do you want people to know about mental health and mental illness?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I want people to know there is hope and there is resilience, and people go through a really difficult time with mental illness. It's not people. I think people need to know this is a really dangerous disease, and we need to support people who are going through this. And like you said, it's not just the stigma of people with illness killing other people. It's not that. It's like we need to we need to help people. And that's why my message is about resilience, because honestly, I read in Powell's bookstore, and I said, I think if I made it there, then anybody can make it, It's not like the Frank Sinatra song.
Yes. I know.
But anyway, it's just, I feel like because I was able to do that, then I could give people hope, really, because I feel like I accomplished something. And so that,
Sherry, there's an organization, I may not be getting the name fully correct, and I will let you know, but it's called United Survivors. Have you heard of that? United Survivors of Suicide?
no,
They have a conference coming up,
no.
and they're looking for keynote speakers as well as workshop leaders. And I'll share that information with you.
Thank you.
Because you might be interested in their organization. It's about lived mental health experience.
Okay.
And you might potentially, you might be interested in doing a workshop or doing the keynote. And the keynote is,
yeah. Thank you.
And the keynote is actually short. It's 30 minutes.
Wow. Well, thank you. You're so resourceful and helpful. You've been that way ever since we met. Thank you.
My pleasure, Sherry. So, Kino, how are you? How's the connection? Kino, can you hear us? So, Sherry, I am sorry, although I don't control the internet.
Okay.
But I'm sorry for internet difficulties.
It's the internet.
Yeah. So, Sherry, do you have any final words you'd like to share, about mental health, about suicide prevention? If someone's in the audience who's having suicidal thoughts or is feeling in despair, any thoughts that you'd like to share with them?
Well, for anybody in the audience, like I said, I really believe that this is going to pass. I know you don't believe it at the time, but it's so important to reach out. I mean, if you don't have any friends, reach out to 988, reach out to somebody, because as in my life, all the depression did pass. It's just not helpful to just sit there and cry and ruminate about it. My partners always told me, like, get busy, do something, go out, go to the garden, just keep moving and not just sit there and cry. But I know how awful it feels. I know that feeling, but it's really important to reach out. So I hope that you're feeling this, and I hope that you're able to reach out. So important is my lived experience. I'm still alive. I didn't think I was going to make it past 30, but here I am, 56.
There you are. Yes. And doing a wonderful contribution to mental health, right? Through even your most recent work. I can't wait to read that anthology, right?
You.
Waking in the Blue. It's a fantastic title too.
Oh.
Yeah. And what you said too, Sherry, makes me think of why I titled the campaign the Hold On Campaign for Suicide Prevention, because if we can just hold on, right, not act on that suicidal thought, then there's hope, right? One can reach out, circumstances change, the feeling can change, but if we are not able to hold on and act, then our life is over, and all that could have been has vanished. So you're right. Reach out. Hold on.
I love what you're doing. I really admire you. I really do. And I think, like, all the stuff that you've done, writing a children's book, you just done. I mean, there's so many things that you've done, and you being the award, you just won this big award from the National Poetry Therapy. You won this big award. I wasn't in the room when you said your speech. I wish I had. But there's so much I admire about you. There is. And I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me today. It really means a lot. It really does. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. And Sherry, how can people learn more about you and your books? What's your website or other social media?
Yeah, my website is, there's no chat here. So it's sherrylevine.com. So it's Sherry is SHERRI, Levine, LEVINE.com. It's my website. It has all information about my books. And Kino, if you want to help me market my book, I would love your help.
Yeah. No, we can definitely set up a chat. We can set up a chat. So this is one of 3 podcasts, and then there's one that we do, with authors, just authors. So you can more than welcome to reach out to me, and then I can tell you when, the available slot is, and you can come on, let's chat about your book, and we take the conversation from there.
Okay. Well, when it gets published, if it gets published, maybe I'll see you again.
Yeah. And also, I'll ask Dan to send you the links, to the other podcasts as well, because there's a lot of amazing, successful authors that have come onto the show. So you can also listen to, what they're doing. There's independent authors, there's authors that have been signed with publishers, best of both worlds. And then you can, decide for yourself, how I can go about it. There's marketing tips that I shared, to do, not to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say, so I'm going to say, God willing, your book finds a publisher. And also, congratulations. Did you say that John Fox was interested in doing?
I sent him the manuscript, and I'm waiting for him to write back. He said he's very interested. So, thanks to you, I got his information.
Yeah, John Fox is an acclaimed poetic medicine practitioner. He's a poet himself, and is a former head of the National Association for Poetry Therapy, and he's written some really wonderful books about the use of poetry in healing. One is called Poetic Medicine, and another one is called Finding What You Didn't Lose, and I recommend those books highly.
Yeah. Oh, I would be so honored. I said, I know it's a big ask, and he said, it is a big ask, but I'm really, happy that you thought of me. So sometimes you can, I don't know if it's a hypomania or what, but sometimes you can feel bold and reach out and write to something. But, it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
I admire your
boldness.
I'm sorry?
It's there in the Bible, ask and you shall receive. If you're not going to ask, then don't expect any result. What's the worst that can happen? You get a no, it's cool,
Right.
You have to get used to getting no's, getting rejected. It only takes one yes, and that one yes can come at 100, it can come at 200, but it will come as long as you're persistent. You're passionate enough to get this work out. It will come. See, because the universe, God will send you the right person, the right publisher, that's going to be compatible with you and your work and what you want to accomplish with it. There's no point getting a publisher that's just in it for the money, because then you're not really going to get that message out effective, because you may have an idea of, let me, focus on these demographics, but then the publisher is going to be like, no, we're not going to get much sales there. Let's focus on these demographics. Okay, you're going to, get sales, but you're not really going to make an impact.
Yeah.
Pros and cons, pros and cons.
Well, unfortunately, poetry nobody makes money with poetry. Unless like Billy Collins or something like that. But you're right. That's very hopeful. I really like your message. So
we're rooting for you.
Yeah, thank you.
100%. There's no point we just chat with each other, once a week, and that's it. It's about building a relationship. How can we help each other along the way as well with our, individual works, to continue to get the momentum going on the topic of mental illness and suicide.
Yeah. Well, so delighted that Diane got my business card. That's so lucky, because I wasn't feeling well that day, and I wasn't up to going to all the workshops. I said, well, I'll put my business cards down and see what happens. And she picked it up. She reached out. So how lucky.
And the right person,
The right person at the right time.
Yeah.
And, it is something to contemplate. Like it's what it's like planting seeds, like or throwing the seeds into the field, and some of them are going to blossom, or you just don't know what kind of impact or how you're going to affect another person. Right?
Yeah.
I had an experience like that recently too. Of I believe it was at an American Foundation for Suicide Prevention event, had to do with lost survivors, and there was a gathering here in Portland back in the fall, and I had attended that event because I'm also a suicide loss survivor. And, over a, a year and a half later, I just received an email from someone that I had met at that event, right? Talking about some challenges that she had had and remembering that we had met each other. And it was just amazing, right? And very humbling and also emotionally touching, right? For someone to have felt a connection and also shared that they had wanted to reach out. There was no expectation that they were reaching out, but I guess I gave them my email address in case they wanted to connect and talk, and shared how they had wanted to, but they were having difficulty. And then finally, so much time passed and they decided today is the day I'm reaching out.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm sharing this also that maybe that's a cosmic principle, right, of seeds in the earth, and some of them are going to flourish, and you don't know which ones.
Well, it sounds like a poem. You just wrote a poem.
No, so don't give up, right?
Right.
So thank you again, Sherry. I'm waving goodbye. Have a great day here in Portland. Have a great evening, Kino, in South Africa.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye. Thanks, Sherry.
Bye.
Bye.